Joining us now to discuss is Dr. Shea Bradley-Farrell, president of the Counterpoint Institute. Thanks for being here tonight, Dr. Shea.
Hi, Kara. How are you?
Great. So how crucial is it for the U.S. to take the lead on negotiations to end the war, especially at this point?
It's extremely crucial, Kara. It's not only crucial for the U.S., but I believe it's crucial for Ukraine and for the EU. The U.S. has promised or appropriated almost $70 billion, which had no oversight on it until about a week ago. We're in a recession, 40-year inflation, and this money is actually being sent to, I believe, enable a war that is going to grind on and on, whether Ukraine is winning a few tactical victories or not, and ultimately is putting us at risk for nuclear conflict. We have a bad situation in the United States right now. I believe in America first. I believe in Ukraine's sovereignty, but we could put that in perspective in just a little while if you'd like to talk about that, because although I believe in their territorial sovereignty, I do not believe that we are fighting a war between authoritarianism and democracy, because if you look at the clear facts, Ukraine is not really a democracy.
And speaking of those, technical victories, as you're describing, with Russia appearing to maybe be pulling out from Kherson, we see Sullivan then today saying, well, so it means we don't even need negotiations. We don't need to talk. We don't need to talk to Russia. We don't need to talk to Putin. Is that the exact wrong thing to be doing right now in this moment?
It absolutely is, Kara. And I want your viewers to know something that probably the majority don't know. Earlier this year, the U.S. military put us at DEFCON 3 status, military readiness, and that was the first time that has happened since 9/11. A couple of weeks ago, the 101st Airborne Division, which is an elite Army division, deployed to Europe and is in Romania practicing war only 3 miles from the Ukrainian border. That's the first time they've deployed to Europe in the last 80 years. And I have heard the reports from the commanders there on the ground saying that they are ready to go into Ukraine at any moment. So I'm wondering, what exactly are we missing here? I believe that we have been fighting a proxy war because we are not just sending humanitarian aid. In fact, most of what we're sending is military weapons. And we are increasing the lethality of the kind of weapons that we're sending. McConnell is calling for even missiles that will strike Russia from Ukraine. And the problem, there are many problems with that we can talk about. Our failed policies in Ukraine have led to the energy crisis in EU. It has driven our adversaries, our biggest adversaries, Russia and China together. They're strengthening alliances as well as becoming more powerful on the global stage. We are sucking American citizens dry during a time when we need to focus on America first. And it is contributing to this terrible energy crisis in the EU, where industries are shutting down. People are out of jobs because of gas prices going higher and higher. And I'm welcome to explain that as well. But you're going to see it even worse, I believe, in December when the EU puts oil embargo on Russia.
And speaking of that, pushing Russia closer into China's arms, that's the concern. I saw even today, I think on Twitter, it was BRICS was trending, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that we see these nations coming together to oppose us, to undermine the value of the U.S. dollar, for example, to create their own financial institutions apart from those that the U.S. really does support on a global scale. I think Russia now is saying they have 12 other nations now saying that they want to join BRICS. It's very concerning. Do you fear that we're creating a block of, maybe if we don't want to say enemies, but at least a competitive group of nations that is working to undermine us, in the sense that we're gutting ourselves already, as you pointed out, both financially, economically, but also our military stockpiles we're depleting. We're putting ourselves in a very low position, especially with these sanctions. We're allowing these other nations to kind of fill in that void, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a much bigger geopolitical picture here that for some reason our administration is not looking at. When Russia started to decrease the amount of oil to the EU, which it's at a 90% reduction now from where it was a year ago, they turned around and started selling that, I meant natural gas, I'm not sure what I said, but 99% reduction in natural gas. They turned around and started selling that natural gas to China at a 50% reduction. China is gaining the energy and economic strength that it needs to overcome the U.S., or at least its goal of overcoming the U.S. as the biggest economic power. And Russia was able to get around those sanctions. Russia and China also signed an $80 billion 10-year oil and gas deal in February. They have been on the stage, Putin and Xi together, saying that there's no end to our collaboration. At the same time, China is strengthening alliances with Arab countries in the Middle East. And again, I think that once the oil embargo goes into place, a very similar thing will happen because oil prices have started to skyrocket just like the natural gas prices because there's a lower amount of oil that Russia is producing in anticipation of the embargo. And guess what? China has, in June, overtook the EU as the biggest importer of Russian oil. Turkey has increased the amount of Russian oil they're importing. India has done the same thing. The BRICS alliances have been around for a couple of decades, so that was kind of a given for people that were paying attention that Russia had an alliance to fall back on. My point here is just to say it's a broader picture. It's not just we're going to pour money into Ukraine and everything's going to come out just right because it's hurting the EU and the United States and I believe the Ukrainian citizens.
No, that's exactly right. And about a minute left on the clock, I want to ask you, we've seen some more realist voices, J.D. Vance and others, win their races with midterms. Do you hope to see a change in how foreign policy is conducted in Washington when we have a new Congress seated next year?
Well, Kara, I sure do. I don't think that the majority of Americans understand what's exactly going on in Congress, especially when it's led by a Democratic Congress. I've been working here in D.C. for the past 6.5 years, and the Democrats really tried to get things in bills and in legislation that are very anti-American, specifically and I'm speaking there very much so on the cultural issues, but also in foreign policy. And specifically on Ukraine, I just don't think, we have so many people here that are war hawks to the point where they are undermining U.S. citizens. And I grew up in the military. I'm all for boots on the ground where they need to be. But this is not our war. It is not in NATO or U.S. interest.
I think you're exactly right. We can't overextend ourselves because then we'll lose everything. It's like Icarus flying too close to the sun. But Dr. Shea, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Kara. Good to be with you.